Good morning, Bluewater Church. Welcome to today's service. I'm really glad that you're here and honored, in fact, that you're choosing to spend this time, whether watching the premiere on Sunday morning or some other time during the week, that you're intentionally setting aside this 45, 50 minutes of your life to join us for this service. Your time is not taken for granted. Neither is your presence. We love that you are part of this Bluewater Church family, whether you live locally in Kincardine or you connect digitally in these online spaces. Welcome, and we're just glad that you're here. So today is an in-between Sunday between what we've been learning about this month in June and what we're going to be hearing next month in July. So in June, these last 2 weeks, we heard from Matt Vincent, who has shared with us about some things that he's been learning as he's been leading this network of churches called Reunion. And it really is sharing about the importance of a meal and how coming together around a shared meal, all kinds of beautiful kingdom building things happen. And he walked us through some stories in the Gospels. And if you missed either of those Sundays, I encourage you to go back and check those out. They're all here on our YouTube channel, and you can find those. And that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. It is our second ever Bluewater Roundtable. And I'm joined this morning by Tara Bile and John Farrell, who are part of our Bluewater Church family. Tara, if you don't know her, she's on our board. She is a mom, a wife, an entrepreneur, and she just has such a big heart for bringing people together around, especially a family-style dinner table. And John is our board chair. He is a husband, he is a high school French immersion teacher, and this fall he is going back to school, to chef school, to learn even more about something he is so very talented at, which is cooking, making food and serving food. I have often heard John say that food is his love language. And so they're here this morning to really explore and unpack some of the things that Matt has shared with us over these last 2 Sundays. And these roundtables, we're going to do one every month, and they're not traditional teaching. It's not a teaching that we're used to hearing on a Sunday morning. It's an honest conversation where we're processing some real questions together, feeling some real emotions as we share and question and talk. And I think that there's something so helpful and valuable in sharing in community, in conversation about the things that we are being taught, the things that we're learning, because I think that really helps a lot of the head knowledge sink into our hearts and then actually get applied and practiced in our day-to-day living, which is the point of the teaching anyway. So thank you so much to Tara and John. We had a really good conversation right here at the bridge over some snacks and coffees. And so that's why I'm recording here today. And so that's what we're going to watch in just a few minutes. And then wanted to give you a heads up for next month. It's the first Sunday in July. And over the summer, we're starting a new summer-long series. We're going to have 2 different guest speakers. You're going to hear another couple of roundtables. You might have to hear from me once or twice. It'll be great. But the theme this summer is going to be a summer of slow. Slowing down to the unhurried, patient, loving pace of Jesus. And so some Sundays you're going to receive a traditional teaching. Others are going to be more a little bit different, incorporating some prayer practices right into the Sunday morning service. And summers tend to be a time when people tend to sort of check out, step back while school is off, things are a little bit slower, and just enjoy a slower pace. And so we're saying that's great, but as you're stepping back, rather than checking out with God or with your own spirit, that this is an invitation to step into a slower space with intention, to check in with yourself, to check in with what the Spirit of God is wanting to highlight and teach you. So we're hopefully going to make some spaces here on a Sunday morning to do that this summer. First 2 weeks of July, we're going to hear from guest speaker Melissa Eitzma. Melissa is the lead pastor of the Meeting House Church in Richmond Hill. So I'm really excited for you to meet Melissa. She's awesome. I've really enjoyed getting to know her, and I think that you will too. One more thing before I read a scripture passage for us and we open with a worship song is this afternoon at 4:00 p.m. in Tiverton at Nathan's parents' place. That's Tara's parents-in-law. We're going to meet in person together. We're going to sing worship music. Nathan's going to lead us in song, and we're going to share a meal together. The food is all going to be provided. You don't need to bring anything unless you would like to contribute $5 per meal roughly to cover the cost of it. That would be great, but it is not a requirement by any means. There will be a spot just to put some money in at the event this afternoon. You could also send an e-transfer if you'd like to, but all the information about this afternoon's event, the details specifically, were included on our website, bluewaterchurch.ca/live, where you can find all the information about all of our upcoming live events. Whenever you have questions, that will be the first place to check, but also on our social media, and it was all in an email that was sent out this past Wednesday. So it is going to be outdoors. If it's raining, as I record this right now, the weather forecast for Sunday is like for sure rain. So check your email early this afternoon around noon to check if the event has been canceled. You'll receive an email, and we'll just postpone it for another couple of weeks. It's not officially canceled. We will do this again. In fact, we plan to do something like this every single month on a Sunday afternoon with live worship music, with food, and time to visit with one another. So that's what we're hoping to do this afternoon, 4:00. It's in Tiverton. The address is listed on the RSVP that you sent in, which you can find on our website. The address is also in the email that was sent Wednesday. You do not need to wear a mask to this event, although you may if you're comfortable, but you do need to bring one. Just keep it in your pocket, because in those places, whether it's at the table where you're getting your sandwich or any places where we're not able to stay 6 feet apart from everybody who's not part of our own household, in those times we will need to put on a mask. But besides that, if you're staying 6 feet apart from the people who you don't live with, then you don't need to wear a mask unless you would like to. So I'm really looking forward to seeing many of you this afternoon, and we will sing some more at that point, but in just a moment we are going to sing a worship song here together. But first, I just want to share a few verses with you from Luke chapter 24. And this is a passage that Matt preached on 2 Sundays ago. It's the story of the 2 disciples walking from Jerusalem to the town of Emmaus. It was a few days after Jesus had been crucified, and they were leaving the city feeling totally dejected, depressed, disappointed that this man they had been following was not the Messiah that they hoped he would be. And they were discussing scriptures along the way, the Hebrew scriptures and the law. And as they were discussing these things, someone joined them on their journey and participated in that discussion, and that person was Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, but they didn't recognize him. So Jesus taught them all about the writings of Moses and the prophets, explaining from all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So starting at Luke 24, verse 28, now that we have the context, I want to read for you this passage because it fits in a little bit with today, which is also a communion service. We share communion, celebrate communion once a month, and so we are doing that today, but it is going to be in, I guess, an untraditional way. So I will share more about that in a little while towards the end of the service. If you would like to get communion elements, you're welcome to do that, but the structure is going to be a little bit different. It's actually a practice that we're going to take from the service into the rest of our day. More on that in a moment. Verse 28. By this time, as they'd been walking, they were nearing Emmaus and the end of their journey. Jesus acted as if he were going on, but they begged him, "Stay the night with us, since it's getting late." So he went home with them, and as they sat down to eat, he took the bread and he blessed it. Then he broke it and gave it to them. Suddenly their eyes were opened and they recognized him. And at that moment, he disappeared. And they said to each other, "Didn't our hearts burn within us as he talked with us on the road and explained the scriptures to us?" And within the hour, they were on their way back to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 disciples and the others who had gathered with them, who said, "The Lord has really risen. He appeared to Peter." So we're going to hear a little bit more about this story. It comes up a bit in the conversation that I had with John and Tara. But first, let's pray together. Jesus, good morning. Thank you so much for this time, this opportunity to explore some teaching that has been shared with our church family, that Matt has shared with us over these past few weeks as we've explored the importance of something so simple as sharing a meal in community with intention. And we notice the ways in Scripture, in your life here walking on earth with your disciples, that food played a central role to your ministry. And so just as these disciples were discussing the Scriptures and puzzling it through together, and then you join them along the way to illuminate the truth in those Scriptures, the truth that points to you. Would you do the same thing for us right now as we look back at the teaching that Matt has brought to us? We give this time to you and invite you here, even in the context of sharing food in community. We recognize your presence with us. And it was as you broke the bread and you blessed it and sat with them to a meal that they recalled the Last Supper they shared with you, and they recalled who you were. Their eyes were open and they realized, wow, our hearts were just burning that whole time we were hearing and participating in that conversation. Would you do that for us today? That for each person watching, the things that you've been stirring in our hearts over these last weeks, that as we remember you, as we listen to this roundtable of other people's interpretations and applications of the things we've been learning, that you would open our eyes and cause our hearts to burn and to see your presence, your leadership and your guidance in the things that we've been learning here together, and even throughout the week in other ways that you've been teaching us. And so we just give this whole service to you, this time to you, and we just so long to bask in your presence and to honor you with our words and with our lives. In your name we pray, amen. If you're in a place where you can stand and sing out loud, then I invite you to stand and sing. And if not, we hope to be doing that very same thing, singing together again in person this afternoon. But in the meantime, let's sing this worship song.
I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain
So before we jump into some specific questions about the 2 talks from Matt and Vincent over the last couple Sundays, I thought I'd just check in with each of us to see if there's one thing that really stood out to you from either of the messages, something that you want to take away with you.
I think something for me that I thought was really important to remember through all of this is that the church, more than any other definition, the church is community. And there's really no place better for a community to come together and to reinforce the bonds between them and to express what it really means to be part of a community than around a dinner table.
Nice.
The part that I really enjoyed, maybe because it's my own kind of personal philosophy, is while you're living life and doing things with people and having them all together, is to do it almost without agenda. Like, let God do his thing, and it will happen as he wants it to. Mm-hmm. And just relax and enjoy the community, enjoy the relationships that are building, and just chill. He's got this.
You mean like trust God?
Yeah, like trust him. It's like a new thing we're gonna try out.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah,
that's really good. There was one word specifically that just has kind of stuck in my mind, and that was when Matt was summarizing week 1, he made a few points, and one of them was just basically that the table becomes a place of welcome and a place where there's actually a spot prepared for you because your presence was anticipated. And it's that word anticipate or anticipated that has just like really jumped out to me, because it's so awesome when churches say like everyone is welcome, or it's great to have friends who just have an open invitation where it's like, come by anytime, like you're always welcome. Like that is good. I think that points to a posture of hospitality, but I think it's different when you actually say, I see you. Yeah. I see you. I'm inviting you. Could you come to our place for dinner next Thursday? We want to prepare a meal for you, and actually like invite someone with intention. I think that level of intentionality and anticipation is how God interacts with us, and how we get to interact just like really practically with other people. And I just thought, like, for someone who's feeling isolated or alone especially, or marginalized, that invitation specifically, I see you, goes even deeper than just you're welcome. Like everyone's welcome anytime, but it kind of puts the responsibility out there on the other people to make the initiative to come and interact with me or us or our group. Right. So like that's good. Both are good, but it's the anticipated invitation part that's stuck with me.
Yeah, I think just when we have people over, you also prepare to have different conversations and different levels of socializing depending on who's coming, right? So if we have you and Chev over, I feel like it would be a different vibe than if we had you and Francis over, or Christian Jean, or Wes. Like it's all enjoyable, but it's just different topics will be covered and different, nuances and jokes will be shared and histories and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's special. Like that's really part of the whole thing.
You really think about who is going to be there when you're preparing for a meal when people are coming, whether it's, thinking about what you're going to be talking about, what kind of things are on your mind, what do you know about this person, to be ready to really make them feel welcome in your home, whether it's planning what kind of foods that person likes or what you want to do with all of that. You spend the day, making sure that everything's ready to go. And there's nothing I'm anticipating more for the end of the pandemic than like inviting people to my home again and just rekindling all of those social connections that just don't feel the same on video calls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we have a few sort of specific questions that have come in anonymously from our church family. I've rephrased some of them or put a couple together that I thought were similar. So answer whichever part of it you would like to, if you have a thought about it. So first one is in Luke chapter 24. This is from week 1 for Matt. Jesus was talking to 2 of his disciples on their way to Emmaus after Jesus had been crucified. They'd experienced Jesus' ministry firsthand, but as they were walking with the resurrected Jesus, they didn't recognize him. And it wasn't until over dinner, breaking bread together, that they recalled having broken bread with Jesus before, and they recognized him, and their hearts burned. And so that's very cool. But if you think about our neighbors, the people that you and I know, a lot of them don't know anything about Jesus. They don't know him like these 2 disciples did. In fact, they might have a lot of negative feelings towards God or Jesus and the church. So in a postmodern culture where truth is often quite subjective and people don't know Jesus in that same intimate way, why or how is a shared meal a great space for conversation about faith?
I think the location changes it, right? Like a church location is just like, it's almost expected you're going to talk about church things. And then people are like, am I going to get like hit by lightning if I say something bad at a church, right? Like, and I know they're kidding, but there is that kind of like, certain P's and Q's are followed, right? But once you invite someone into your space, there's already a level of acceptance and safety there, I think, because I think generally speaking, you don't invite people into your home to sabotage them. You generally invite them because you care and want to spend time with them. And so I think that in and of itself puts people at ease. And then people are then more open to having conversations, or they might even bring it up, right? Like most people who come over to my house already know that I'm a Christian, already know that I love Jesus, and I may exhibit that in different ways. So I don't have to talk about my faith. Like they already pretty much know my jam, but they feel more comfortable being like, well, what about this? And I think
sitting around a table is about as far as you can be from standing at a pulpit and like addressing a group of people. I mean, there's no way that sitting around a table ever has that same feeling of, okay, I'm here to listen to this person and I have to like, pay attention and that person's in charge, and it's missing all of the different structures that are there. Just the communal nature of sharing food with people around a table is such an equalizer and just breaks down so many barriers immediately that, the level of familiarity and community that is necessary in the mere act of sharing food, it kind of destroys any feeling of, being preached at or being taught or, like you said, you don't invite people to your house to sabotage them. And if
you shouldn't do that.
Don't. It's just lectures over meals don't work. Like, at some point, you have to stop talking to eat, and then other people have a chance to speak too. It makes for conversations instead of for lectures, and when you are having conversations, you can understand the people, and you can have back and forth with it, and no one feels like they're just being harangued by somebody. So it tears down so many of those structures that make people uncomfortable, and brings people together in a totally different way.
So like you're all participants. I also think like in that everybody needs to eat, again, it kind of reminds us of our humanity and that's something we all have in common. So it really highlights the things that we have in common and maybe even the shared experiences we've had or similar experiences we've had that just allows for some more organic connection and relationship building in that safe context. Cool. Any other thoughts before next question?
That's all I have written in my notes.
All right then. Moving on. Okay, I've kind of mashed a few questions together, so just go with me. But how does a meal become missional? Is it something that is intentional? Like you're bringing a level of intention to it, or is it just something that happens organically? Like, what's the difference between intentional time together and just hanging out? Or is there a difference? And Matt, in his talk, seems to assume that people have a natural curiosity about spiritual things. And this person who wrote this question asks, in my experience, the difficulty is getting to these deeper conversations with friends and acquaintances in the first place. So what are your thoughts on this? Are people naturally spiritually curious? Do we need to bring a level of intention to try and have some of those conversations? Or is it organic?
I definitely think more organic. I mean, sharing a meal, being around a table, and having all of these conversations. I like to think, I hope, that that comes from a place of understanding, not from a place of, I want to be teaching this and this is where the conversation needs to go. I mean, when we're sharing food with people, familiarity and understanding are two things that grow so quickly at a dinner table. And those same two things are antithetical to prejudice. Like, the more you understand somebody, the less prejudice you have about that person. And that works both ways in any kind of a missional setting. If you are the one who is hoping to introduce the other person to God, or if you are the person who is being introduced to God, either of those things, you have assumptions about the other person. There's all kinds of things in play that are kind of dictating what you want to say, how you think you're going to handle things. And the more time you spend listening and caring for that person, then the more you are going to understand that person, and the easier it's going to be for them to, see what God does in your life, see why this kind of thing is important. If you truly understand the person that you are talking to, because you've, shared meals with them and you've put in the time and the effort to have a real connection, then any kind of deeper conversation that you're hoping to have is going to be much easier, because you're going into this knowing who you're talking to, instead of just addressing someone and, using what you guess about them from the little bit that you know. So hopefully it's more of an organic thing, that as the two people start to understand each other more, it gets easier and easier to have these things, and they notice differences in each other's lives and in each other's approach to things, and it opens doors for conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with John. I think it has to be organic, because I think people can, for lack of a better word, they feel a sabotage coming from a mile away. Like, you can't push that. And I think a lot of times we forget, again, it's not our job to save people, right? It's not our job. Like, God's got that under control. Your job is to love people and try and bring them closer. And I think when you push things, you push people away. I don't think any of us came to love Jesus because someone was like, listen, this is the gospel and blah, 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 blah. Like, nobody, that didn't happen. All of us came to know Jesus because of a relationship we developed with someone who we loved and cared for, and likewise. And they, they showed us a way that we were attracted to because of those things. And that just happens organically over time. And I think that I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I was just going to interject. I think, this is speculation, so forgive me if I'm wrong. I think that could be generational a little bit, because I know people in my life who followed Jesus because they heard someone preach about him. that they'd never met before.
Really?
Thinking of one person in specific who saw Billy Graham on TV and then decided to give her life to God, and that was the start of it for her. But yeah, I did write down in my notes kind of the same thing that you both were talking about, which is literally learn to ask good questions and just listen well, because listening builds trust, it builds safety. If you listen to them, they might maybe listen to you if they have questions for you, or if you're living a life that is worth questioning. It's like that idea of loving people and loving the world, but being a little different from the world, because we follow an ethic of Jesus, and it sometimes, not always, but sometimes looks drastically different from the culture and the ethic of the one that we live in. And so that might provoke natural curiosity, which is really then you just being yourself with people up close enough that they can actually get to know you.
Yeah.
So Matt said something to the effect of that Jesus revealed himself in the middle of everyday activity, and that the meal was a significant part of ancient life at that time. So how can we, or how might we redeem the idea of the meal in our fast-paced Western culture? And I kind of asked the question individually in our families, but also as a church community.
I think it's an interesting question. I mean, comparing the way that the world today functions and looking at the ancient world and everything, like, I think if anything, meals are becoming more important. I mean, meals together are becoming less frequent as people are busy and people have everything going on. But I think one thing that the COVID pandemic has really made people think about, me for one, is just the importance of that kind of thing. And whether that's inviting people around to your place and preparing a meal for them, or sharing a meal, at a church function or any kind of community thing, or even just going to a restaurant with someone. I mean, we took my in-laws to a restaurant patio for Father's Day, and just that moment of sitting, sharing a meal with them across a table, it was, one of the deepest connections that I've had with anybody since this whole thing began. And I think really meals never went anywhere, just our understanding and the frequency of them and everything shifts over time. It's become something that if we're going to have these meals where we're really coming together, it takes a different level of intentionality when we have these busy worlds and everyone has a car and your job is somewhere else and, kids have their own schedules and everything's going on. We now have these special occasions that are all still based around meals. Any kind of family gathering or celebration with a church community or whatever is going on, that is based around the meal. That's still, Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving dinner, everything like that. When we have big occasions, we mark them with a meal because that's how we draw everybody together. Even if you're getting to know someone, you're going for a date, then you go out for dinner because, meals have always been fundamental, and we can just tie all of that back together and remember just the power that the meal has to really deepen bonds of community and try and have more of those meals with more people.
Do you agree or have a different take as two working parents in a family with teenage kids?
Yeah, well, I wrote down, just do it.
Much shorter, yeah.
Easy.
Well, and I know that's easier said than done. So yeah, like Nathan and I both work and we have small children at home, so it's easier to have a meal together because like they're home, right? But even our son is 13, so he's frequent now. He's like, oh, I'm gonna go play with basketball, blah, blah, blah. But I think people also tend to overcomplicate it, right? So we eat dinner together every night, but like last night, honestly, it was all four of us ate Mr. Noodles in front of the TV. But we were still together and we were still eating and we had like no energy for anything, but we were still together, right? And then, or another night it might be we're having hot dogs and chips. Or, and like today we're gonna have prime rib, so it's a little bit like, it's all over the place, and frequently if I have extra, like pre-COVID, I would like call up my single friend and be like, dinner is in 10 minutes. Do you want to come over?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And like he would come by, or like my next door neighbor when I know like their home and their family's in Hamilton. I'm like, hey, right? And I think it's just a lot easier than we make it to be. And to be fair, I tend to extrovert well, so that might be less terrifying than it may be for you. But
well, I will speak, like, not only am I an introvert, this is true, I also don't cook. I can, we eat, but we don't have a meal every day, and we don't have kids. It's just me and Francis. We eat food every day, but we don't have a meal every day. And sometimes our work schedules are different so that we can't actually take a break at the same time.
Right.
Like today, Francis is away and won't be back till around 8, and I'm going out and won't be back till 9. So it just doesn't always happen. But that being said, I still found ways to be intentional about having a relationship over food. Like, I have friends who do cook and invite us over. Or I have friends also who know that the bar is very low when they come and eat at our house. Or, I mean, we have this kind of food. I'll make a coffee, it'll taste great, and you will get some kind of pastry that I didn't make. And that's great.
Yeah.
Or like restaurants are so great at facilitating that too. Or a picnic. Like, it doesn't have to be complicated, even for those of us who are introverts, whose like gift isn't making or serving food or bringing a lot of people together.
One of my favorites is come over and have a beer on the deck and we'll eat a bag of chips.
Great.
Yeah, that totally counts.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, I do think it's not as complicated as we make it, but also there's something to be said if there's for maybe a season you're really busy and that's fine. But in the long term, I do think that we can just get comfortable with slowing down, with not being like uber efficient all the time, with maybe reprioritizing what we would call success in some ways, especially as a church ministry. Like, is success in the strength of the relationships of the people in your congregation, the relationship with the broader community, like deepening spiritual growth, like just relationship with Jesus? Or is it in the numbers of how fast your church is growing, which is not a bad thing. Not saying don't grow, Bluewater Church, but it doesn't need to be the metrics for success, because if popularity or numbers or wealth or other things maybe are measures for success, that I think, at least in my mind, I'm going to rush through dinner time. Food is just going to be an essential nutrient and not this like practical opportunity that can be quite simple to just build relationships and perhaps have spiritual conversations, because we're spiritual people, so they might just bubble up. So the story of Zacchaeus in Luke 19, Matt talked about last Sunday. And Zacchaeus, just as a refresher, went from being a tax collector for the occupying Roman force, basically stealing from his fellow Jewish brothers and sisters, and paying the debt that the things that he'd stole from those people, and then giving even more on top of that, giving away his wealth. And so something significant happened in the heart of Zacchaeus for him to make that 180. And we don't get to read that part. We know that he had a meal with Jesus in his home. And then sometime after that, maybe it was the next day when he woke up, maybe it was a week or a month later, we're not sure, but he made this 180 and gave away all this money and returned it and more. So this is pure speculation. What do you think could have happened in that gap of time in Zacchaeus' mind and his heart?
I think Zacchaeus was not the only guest. Or no, Jesus was not the only guest at this thing. Like, it wasn't, Jesus and Zacchaeus had a one-on-one deep conversation over whatever food was already at Zacchaeus' house. Beer and chips, yeah. I think Jesus, always was traveling with this whole group of people around him, and there was such a crowd that Zacchaeus had to climb a tree so that he could see Jesus at all. And also, Zacchaeus gets introduced by the Bible talking smack about him. Like, the dude's reputation was nothing when the Bible itself is like, and Zacchaeus was there, and he's a gross dude, and we don't like him for these reasons. And then the story goes from there, and Jesus comes along, being Jesus, and has this whole dinner group, and they're at Zacchaeus' house. It may have been one of the first times that Zacchaeus had been included in this community. Like, Jesus brings the community to Zacchaeus. It's in Zacchaeus' house. You can imagine the difference in the atmosphere that it makes when there's a crowd of people in there and they're sharing a meal together and having conversations with Jesus. Zacchaeus just sees a totally different way to live, a different way to approach his community. I bet that after that, the next meal, he's sitting alone in his house surrounded by piles of money, and he's just thinking like, well, this doesn't seem so good. Like, I want the people to be here again.
This is lame.
Yeah. So Zacchaeus, like, a total change of heart because Jesus just blows into his life and like, here's all these people, community, love, together, fellowship. Look at all of these things that can happen if you're not pushing everyone away. And Zacchaeus learns the different approach to life and really jumps right into it and becomes part of the community in such a dramatic way that, he gets his own little mini redemption story in the Bible where it's like, and then he was fine and we like Zacchaeus now.
We like Zacchaeus now. Yeah, that's so good. But yeah, he saw the value perhaps of the relationship of the community, which you can't have a relationship if you're constantly violating people's trust.
Yeah.
Literally stealing from them.
My kids would say that's super sus,
which
is
sus.
Short for suspect.
Thank you. I didn't even know that.
I'm hip now.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
No one would suss otherwise.
Right? I had two kind of stories. One was the much more gracious John version, and then the other one was kind of like after that meal, maybe Jesus and Zacchaeus hung out again, like went for coffee later, and then Jesus was kind of like, "So you're kind of a dink, and here's why." And the only reason I think that is because sometimes I feel that maybe how Jesus speaks to me, where he's like, so that's kind of not your most gracious moment. Maybe in the future not talk to someone like that or not think those things. And I think, but the amazing thing about Jesus is when he confronts someone, like someone sus, like Zacchaeus, or otherwise, is he's never like, you're a bad person, blah, blah, blah. He's
you
there,
suck.
yeah, you're super sus. He's like, so you did this bad thing. I want you to go do good things now. And there's no like, bah, bah, bah. It's just like, yeah, like, now this. There's no like ultimatums or like shaming or anything like that. Like he's very like, now you know better, go do better.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe they had a couple of coffees in between there and that happened, or it could be the other way, like who's to say?
Yeah.
My version's a little bit more dramatic and juicy, but
Well, I think both make perfect sense. Like to see the community that you don't have that you could be a part of if you weren't harming those relationships.
Yeah.
But then also to be learning how Jesus and his kingdom operate, and then to actually, like you're describing repentance, doesn't have to be a whole heap of shame and guilt. There might be guilt when you feel like sad for what was lost, but you just get to turn to like, oh, I was damaging relationships. I don't want to do that. But also I've been told that that's not a good thing by someone I'm growing to trust and like and maybe love. I could just be different. I could just do differently, and then now I'm a good guy in the Bible.
Yeah.
I'm not sus anymore.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I didn't have an answer to that question, so I'm glad that you both had really good speculative answers that make a lot of sense to me.
If you need anything else cleared up, John and I are like here for you.
Yep,
And we will put their email addresses in the description box.
1-800.
No, but in all seriousness, the board email address is on the website, and these lovely people are both part of that board, so
That may or may not be a selling point for you.
We try.
Keeping it real. Okay, how does sharing a meal as kingdom hospitality play out in your lives? Which you kind of shared a little bit already, but we could talk more about that. But also how does that play out in the life of Bluewater Church, and how might we, both individually but also as a church family, lean into this aspect of mission, ministry, of being the church more, especially post-COVID?
I think in some ways, like Bluewater is already really great at that. Like shout out to Wes here, because he runs this amazing program in our town that people are talking about, where there was a drop-in center here pre-COVID that was super successful, and John helped with one for teens too, right? So that was an amazing endeavor. Now we had to pivot for COVID, but I think Wes is still organizing dozens of meals a week.
Yeah, well over 1,000 meals. Do you have any kind of updated number or at all current number? Because it was 1,000 months ago.
It's probably closer to 2,000 now.
Yeah.
Being all prepared by volunteers and people who were part of the drop-in, receiving those home-cooked meals on a weekly basis. But also people outside of the drop-in community who never actually set foot here before. So that's still happening, and I think that's going to continue even when drop-in opens here at the bridge. Again on Mondays and hopefully Wednesdays for teen lunches. Yeah, that is amazing. And the practical food part is great. But we're really looking forward to being able to open again in some capacity to actually share that meal here with some of that drop-in community, because that's part of what made it special.
Yeah, and having that for, the people who come to the drop-in, or for the teenagers, some days we had more than 100 kids coming down from the high school to grab lunch on Wednesdays here at the drop-in center. And then, they go back to the high school and they just talk about it the whole time. The amount of kids I had asking me in the hall, hey, why is that a thing? You were there, why are they just giving away free food? And it was well, because they care about you. We're here to support people.
Life.
Yeah.
We're questioning.
So that kind of thing is definitely a strength that we have had and that we continue to have, and that we have found ways to keep that up even while it has been unsafe to gather. We've still been bringing this idea of hospitality and supporting people to thousands around town. So it's something that has always been a strength with this group. Even moorings and the board and everything, I always would make dinner for board meetings, and people would come over and, we'd all have a meal together before it started, and that was my favorite, and I can't wait to do that again. But
it's my favorite too.
Yeah, good times.
Board meetings are not the same anymore.
Yeah, I can still make the food, and then you can just watch me eat it on Zoom while you talk. But it doesn't quite have that same hospitable
that
vibe.
Je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, something's missing.
But our moorings are getting together, and now we're coming into summer, and people are looking for opportunities to do bonfires or safe outdoor gatherings with their mooring, keeping these ideas of meals and this kind of things as microcosms of kingdom hospitality, where right now in this current season, we're having it with people in small groups, and we're all thinking of different ways that we can keep expanding this thing further. We're building a culture here of sharing meals, talking to people directly, welcoming them to our table, and that kind of culture, it grows. People enjoy being a part of that kind of thing. People invite other people to that kind of thing. We're working on building this feeling, this culture in our town where we just do things together, and it's nice, and it makes people feel good. It makes people feel welcome, and that's really my favorite thing about Bluewater, is that we're really working for this shift in how we do things. Mm-hmm. It's not about sitting in a pew and listening to things. It's about knowing the people and having real relationships, and that's great.
Yeah. And I think moving forward, there's also the intention of moving that mission forward, in that we're like monthly, we're planning on having like a big thing where we get together and see each other and stuff.
This Sunday, June 27th, as you're watching.
Mm-hmm. Be there.
Be there. Yeah, and I think that it's just that whole paradigm shift of it's not about this, it's about this.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. This has been very wonderful. Thank you. Thank you again, John and Tara, for sharing those honest thoughts and perspectives, and working through some of these things with each other in our personal lives, but also in the context of our church community. We're just so grateful for both of you. And now we're going to transition into what would be the time where we would celebrate communion together. But what we're going to do is a little bit different, and we will return to the more traditional format of sharing, celebrating communion together next month, because this is something that we do every single month. It's something that is important to us here at Bluewater. But what we've done this morning instead is, as we've had this roundtable over coffee and some snacks, you're going to watch a short clip of John and Tara and myself responding to the question of remembering Jesus, and saying, what is one thing today that you love about Jesus? Maybe it's a characteristic, perhaps it's a personal story or a story from the scriptures. And so that's what you're going to hear, is John and Tara and myself actively sharing something personal that we just love about this Lord that we follow and we serve. And so my invitation to all of you is that today, maybe it's going to be at the live event this afternoon as we're eating sandwiches outside. Maybe it's going to be around the lunch table with your family. Maybe it's going to be as you're drinking a coffee and writing an email or texting a friend or on the phone with somebody. I encourage you to share with somebody today something that you love about Jesus, some way that he has made an impact on you. It could be a long story. It could be 2 sentences in the live chat as we're watching, or over a text message. And in this way, actively remembering Jesus and acknowledging his presence with us in our daily lives, in the midst of normal things like eating a meal, drinking a coffee, breaking bread together. And so I hope that this is encouraging to you, and I believe that it is honoring to our Lord to actively remember him and bring this practice of living in communion and connection with him into our everyday, our all day, and into our relationships. So that's what you're going to see in this pretty raw and honest video. You'll see some honest emotions here, and that's great because it means we're just being authentic people. So let's watch that now. So we've kind of shared food together already, and beverage. Not quite a meal, but definitely a nice snack. And so it's kind of reminiscent in some ways of the Last Supper, where Jesus broke bread with his disciples and he said, remember me every time you do this, and how an intimate place like sharing a meal or a snack can be a natural point where you just begin to talk relationally about the things that matter to you and are important to you. And so I thought for this communion part, we could just try something different, which is to just share, each of us, something about Jesus, whether a characteristic, a story, a memory, something about Jesus that we love.
Are you going first?
I can?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so it's hard to choose based on the day, because my moods are kind of the day. It depends on the day, honestly, what I appreciate the most. But in thinking about this topic, and also kind of going back to the difference between welcome and anticipation, I think they go hand in hand. But I love how Jesus not only welcomes us, just like an open door, drop by anytime policy, but he actually anticipates us to the point where he knows every single one of us by name. And then he actually will leave his house party or the 99 sheep in the field and go after the one, go after you specifically and bring you into family and community. And yeah, just that he called Zacchaeus by name.
Even though he was sus.
Yeah, super sus.
Yeah.
And he's like, you matter to me. And that changed Zacchaeus' life. And it happened, weirdly enough, in the context of community. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting chills right now.
Love that.
Okay, next.
I think it's important to remember. I mean, we've been talking here today about the road to Emmaus and then having a meal and coming to understand Jesus better. We've talked about Jesus going to Zacchaeus' home and sharing a meal with him and helping Zacchaeus to, become part of his community, all of these different things. But something that really has been resonating about Jesus with me lately is that's not the only side of Jesus that there is. We're recording this today on Monday, which is Indigenous Peoples Day. And in world history, Canadian history specifically, is hard to ignore recent findings, recent things. There's a lot of conversations going on about the ugly colonial legacies that have built this country and still inform how everything operates and create such injustices in our community. And so much of this was set up by people claiming to be doing this on behalf of God and doing this because of Jesus. And when we see anything what stories do we have in the Bible of Jesus encountering things that were being done on behalf of or because of God that were obviously not? He doesn't always sit down at that table. Jesus is ready to flip that table and make them reset it and do it right. And we're here in this situation now where the Indigenous peoples in this country have been subjected to an awful lot of awful things that humans have done and said we're doing this because God. And Jesus is never that person. Jesus would never be the person who forces people to give up. All of it just makes me so angry. And we need to remember that it also makes Jesus angry. And Jesus isn't always this gentle guy who sits down at the table and gradually educates you into being better. When the time comes, ready to flip that table and make things be done correctly. So there's so many facets to Jesus. There's so many facets to this relationship that we're all working towards with our communities, with our country, with ourselves, with our God. And we need to remember that, sometimes it's rough, because sometimes it needs to be rough, because human nature and divine nature want different things, and people have a bad habit of justifying what they do in the wrong way and invoking God. And Jesus doesn't put up with that stuff. Jesus is better than people, and we need to let that be, and we need to respect that and hold people accountable like he would.
Yeah, the takeaway from that the one line, Jesus doesn't always sit at the table. Sometimes he flips the table.
Yeah.
I love that.
Right? 'Cause-
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so good. Thanks, John.
Got a little angry there. Sorry.
That's good. Similar to John, because I tend to be a little bit feisty. Yeah, I just love that he stands up to religious bullies. And it's very rare. Actually, I'm taking that away. You don't see Jesus getting mad at too many people in the Bible. People he gets mad at are the people using his name to like hurt people. And that's when the tables start flipping.
Yeah.
And I love that Jesus loves me. But
Thank you, Tara and John. Thank you to all of you watching. I hope that this morning has been a blessing to you, an encouragement, and if challenging, that it has been a helpful challenge that is propelling you forward in your journey of transformation and relationship with Jesus and with each other in community. I so love this church family. I'm so looking forward to seeing many of you this afternoon. Again, check your emails. If it's pouring rain at like noon today, you'll get an email saying, actually, we're going to switch to this date because it probably won't be all that fun to sing in the rain. Although that does sound terribly romantic. Anyway, maybe another time. But hopefully weather's good and we will see each other this afternoon and share stories about one thing today that you are just so grateful for, one thing about Jesus that you love. Again, whether it's a characteristic, a personal story, or a story from the scriptures. And that's pretty much it for today. I want to thank especially Laura Beth, our Flow intern, who put this morning's service together. This past week has been really busy for her. She had the second Flow intern retreat, and then also she has a second part-time job, which she was working on later this week, and somehow still managed to make this wonderful service and upload it here so that we could have this shared space. Thank you, Laura Beth. We appreciate you so much. And we look forward to hearing from Melissa next week. I'll share more about our new series for the summer, A Summer of Slow, Embracing the Unhurried Pace of Jesus. So till this afternoon or till next Sunday, bless you and just have a wonderful week. See you soon.